Hello and welcome to another session of Reading Comprehension Skills. In this session, we'll look at one passage, one full length passage, and we'll try and analyze, understand, observe, see what we can learn from it. The idea is to apply whatever we learned in the previous sessions. Ideas like when we look at a text, always dividing it into main idea and secondary details, the idea of general and specific kind of information, the idea of, especially the idea of paying attention to conjunctions as keywords, right? Because they help connect sentences as well as provide a logical indicator of what is happening. So we look at a full-length passage, and our idea, there are no questions at the end of the passage. For starters, we just want to fully comprehend the passage with all its nitty-gritties and see how these skills that we have learned can be applied in trying to better understand things, right? So before you begin the analysis, please go through the passage by yourself. Try and identify the main idea. Try and sum it up in a line or two. But without trying the passage, there will be no point in going through the analysis. So please go through the passage. Okay, so I hope you had a good look at the passage and you tried your best to comprehend and find the main idea. So we'll go through the whole passage line by line. We'll try and extract meaning out of it and see what we can learn, right? And how we can apply our techniques. So let's begin with the first line. A boy and his inseparable partner, a cute pug-faced dog. Now, when I read this line, I might not understand what exactly is being discussed, right? Just a boy and a cute pug-faced dog. Though some of you might remember it from a Vodafone ad, but that's not really important. Let's assume that we did not understand much out of it. I read the second line. It says Amir Khan in a string of refreshing new avatars telling us the matlab of thanda. Again, somewhat vague, but I know Amir Khan, and he's talking about Amir Khan telling us about the matlab of thanda, right? I go on. I says, what do some of these? Now these becomes a pronoun for me. These highly memorable images, that means these two sentences that I have just read, a boy and his inseparable partner and about Amir Khan, they refer to some kind of images, right? Images from where? From the last 1 year's advertising. So now I know that probably the general idea is advertising, and line number one, that is a boy and his dog, were a specific example. Amir Khan also was a specific case of the general idea of advertising, right? Going back to the sentence, what do some of these highly memorable images from the last 1 year's advertising tell us about the changing role of advertising in the building of brand? This here right now, the author has listed out almost the main idea very, very clearly, the changing role of advertising in the building of brand, right? Though, to be more accurate, I should cover in my main idea answer that what was it before and what has it become. But otherwise also, this is a very good indicator of what the passage is about, the changing role of advertising in the building of brand, right? So I go on. They refers to a pronoun. They what? They, the ads that have been mentioned in the previous paragraph. They reflect the maturing of a trend that's been a few years in the making. So there is a trend. That trend indicates a change of pattern or a change of style, and it has been a few years in the making. That means the progress has been time related, right? Brands attempting to capture basic category values. Now I read this sentence, I know what brands are. Brands attempting to capture something also I can understand, but I do not know what basic category values are. And chances are when I read a sentence like this, my brain just shuts down. It doesn't even think to the extent, okay, let me reread and brands. It just there's a problem here, right? I really don't understand what the sentence means as of now. But we learned that keywords can help us a lot. It can help us in terms of providing a logical connection or direction, especially let's say in this passage, and in this situation, is going to be of a lot of help. So if I start focusing on this rather than, so brands attempting to capture basic category values is idea X or of color red, let's say, rather than There remaining to content fight at the margin on the battleground of differentiation. Again, might be a difficult sentence for you and you might not be able to make sense out of it, but just that it used to be this, and rather than this, now brands are attempting to capture basic category values even if I do not know. So I see this rather than at least tells me that there are two ideas or two philosophies being discussed. Brands attempting to capture basic category values, which is what they're doing in the present, and there again there refers to the brand, their remaining content to fight at the margin on the battleground of differentiation. I'm assuming I did not understand the sentence, but I noticed that there are two possible styles because of the keyword rather than, right? And slowly we'll try and extract more meaning. I hope you are with me together, right? So now for decades, I should pay a little attention to this also, because earlier it said they reflect the maturing of a trend that's been a few years in the making. So the time factor is there. For decades, that means we are going into the past, right? If I look at the sentence again, brands attempting is in the present rather than their remaining is in the past. So if I'm going to for decades, chances are I'm going to discuss the idea that was after the rather than, right? Battleground of differentiation. So probably is related to that. Advertising has defined its primary role as a sharp etching out of what makes a brand stand apart. Now I did not understand what was the battleground of differentiation, but the word differentiation I have some idea of different things being different, and here it says stand apart. So another idea that we discussed earlier was that the same idea in a passage is mentioned in different words using different words. So differentiation and what makes a brand stand apart. The thinking, which thinking, probably the differentiation based thinking, was powerfully kicked off by Roger Reeves and his concept of USP. Again, if you know what USP is unique selling proposition. Again, unique means what is different, what makes a brand stand apart, battleground of differentiation, right? Searching for a better mousetrap. Now you might think, okay, what is this suddenly mousetrap here? But again, better, different, stand apart, USP, right? So the idea of differentiation should be getting slightly clearer in your head, right? Over time, again, try and connect this to what we looked at earlier for decades. Now connect this with over time. That means we are slowly moving across in the trend. The idea of differentiation, right? Again, the word differentiation is coming up. Came to include softer emotional differences in brand value, but another keyword. So it seemed like there was a change, but the tacitly assumed role of advertising remained the same, right? The same as what? The same as earlier. And what was it earlier? It was differentiation based, what makes a brand stand apart. So we're still in the color blue, right? To tell the story of how exactly a brand was different from or better than. By now, I think the idea should be slightly stronger in your head. He started off by using slightly complicated terms like battleground of differentiation and margin. Now he's very clearly telling you how a brand is different from or better than a host of competitors. Which thinking? Ask yourself which thinking. Again, the answer would be differentiation based thinking. Served us well for a long time. In the India of 90s, for instance, is an example. With a steady influx of new players with new stories to tell, it made sense for advertising. So you're getting a little more detail about the idea or philosophy behind the differentiation based advertising, right? Made sense to point towards a dramatic new features. Once again, the idea of difference or brand values that these players brought with them. Powerful brands were built on the back of such concepts as GoldenEye, Zip Drive. Now again, when I look at these GoldenEye, Zip Drive, ZPTO and PSPO, Nimbu and Amla, these are specifics, right? Specific examples, and ask yourself specific examples of what, and the answer would be these are specific examples of differentiation based advertising. Right now it might seem like, okay, we have discussed so much and we've only reached paragraph 2, but remember, if I grasp the pattern, then I can really increase my speed as I move along, right? So again, moving on. So if you got the idea, you'll see that the idea of differentiation continues a little more. Differentiated tariff schemes were enough, right? And then there is a however. That means there's going to be a change. However, there's a contrast. That means there's going to be a change. However, with increasing competition and the steady onset of product and price parity, that means more and more the products were equal to each other. The arguments at the margin. Now you know what the argument at the margin means. Probably telling the consumer or the customer why your brand is different is the argument at the margin, right? So basically, the differentiation based advertising began to sound thin. That means it started losing value. It was difficult for consumer to remain fascinated with the precise difference between the chaos punch action. Again, though there is a very specific idea of chaos punch action washing machine, uh, but is the idea about chaos punch action of washing machine, or is it about that the idea of differentiation based advertising had stopped working because the consumer couldn't tell a difference between whether it's a chaos punch or a turbojet? So the chaos punch and the turbojet washing machines are again specifics, but furthermore, they are specifics to indicate why the differentiation based advertising was slowly losing ground, right? So I hope you get the idea. Moving on, it's not surprising, therefore, conclusion that today, again, try and connect it to what we looked at earlier. It said 4 decades, right? And then it says over time, and now we are finally going to today. We are seeing the birth of campaigns like Hutch's Boy and Dog, right? Again, going into specific, we're mentioning specific campaigns. The contrast originally was between basic category values, right? So we really did not understand what basic category values was then. Now maybe looking at these examples, I'll understand. Based on a feature that's been at parity, that means a feature that everybody has and nobody is different, but rendered unique in by the way in which it forges an original connection with the viewer at the human level. So okay, so this is a connection building, emotional connection building rather than the differentiation. So capturing basic category values maybe means building emotion collection or something like that, right? I'll try and understand more as I go along. Or Airtel's Express Yourself, another specific example, right? Which again takes a fundamental category value common to all players, again slightly complicated words, but manages to appropriate it to the brand, again difficult, but through a unique emotional connect. So so now I know there is differentiation based advertising and there is a emotional connection based advertising, right? Even again, if I did not understand these fundamental category value common to all players, though as I go along I will understand, right? I hope this is also telling you how much effort or how much concentration is required and how RC can be very interesting and could be a great learning experience in terms of when you're reading a passage, you're also learning about the world. So as I read the passage now, when I see the next ad on TV, maybe I should think whether it's a differentiation based advertising or whether it's a story building communication or what kind of advertising is happening, right? Okay, so moving on. Even soft consumer brands that had already gone beyond product based arguments in their communication still tended to be fixated with etching out their point of difference. Oh my god, okay, so the passage again has gone back towards differentiation. Now, let's say a very formal or a very organized author would have done it in bullet points only, right? Fix one side for differentiation and the other side for connection, emotional connection based advertising. But here the author is slightly regressing back. So in soft drinks, for instance, Pepsi example, right? But what is the example? Tended to focus a lot of energy is how it was the younger cola. So again, we are talking about the differentiation based advertising. So if I were to give it a color, my color for this area again would be blue, right? Thumbs up was different from Pepsi. So both Pepsi and thumbs up become specifics, examples, right? So if you start noticing, a bulk of the passage is a lot of specifics. If you get the main idea, you can move through the specifics fairly quickly. And notice also how we are developing speed. As we get the main idea, it becomes easier and easier to go faster. But over the past year or so, now we have become completely in the present. Over the past year or so, see how the communication in this category. Now we're talking about Pepsi and Thumbs Up, and he's calling it category. So maybe category means an industry or a particular kind of service, right? Today, Coke is content in telling us engaging stories that use simple insights on the way as we speak as people, and which come from the brand's point of difference, not from the brand point of difference, but from. So this not from and but from is another example of a conjunction rather than, or a contrast creating conjunction. But from the appropriation of category nomenclature, again difficult word, but you know this simply means emotional story connection with people. Pepsi increasingly tells us stories about young people and their attitudes in an absolute, again, the thing to attention and the thing to really focus at is that rather than, right? Thumbs up. So we are talking about specifics using Coke and Pepsi. We're showing how they are now going for basic category values rather than differentiation, right? Thumbs up. Now, if you got the pattern, I'm sure you can also develop your own speed. Thumbs up's latest work is focused a lot more on telling its own story rather than, right? So both the idea that there is a specific, these are all specifics, and the idea that this conjunction is very clearly organizing information for you should be visible to you, right? Now I can really go fast. Close up. So now this is will be happening. Close up. Dabur Prash, VIP. These are all specific. So if you got the idea, you can jump through them very quickly. These brands advertising is far more involved with befriending the consumer through the dramatization of interesting category truths. Again, something difficult, but focus on the rather than. Again, life will become very easy. Why? Consumer through dramatization of interesting category truths is now simplified in your head as storytelling, communication, emotional connection building, rather than arguing subtle points of difference. So also notice how many times the same idea is repeated in a passage, right? So as we said earlier, a passage of 30-40 lines is not really 30-40 lines, is maybe 3-4 lines stated over and over again in different language so that you understand, so that you are convinced with the material, right? Moving on. So are we saying that there is an inherent problem with the idea of differentiation? By now, I know very clearly the passage is about the changing role of advertising, changing from differentiation based advertising to category truths, capturing basic category values, or simplified to emotional storytelling, right? So not really. If an inherently differentiated message still provides enough creative latitude to tell a highly engaging story, center shock, Nokia, fine. So he's saying, okay, somebody, I mean, basically was raising the question that now is differentiation totally dead, and he's saying no, in certain situations it can still work, and he's using center shock and Nokia as an example, right? However, again, using a contrast keyword. So he was saying differentiation still works. He continues, the problem is that the argument increasingly shifts to the margin. Now I know margin, argument at the margin means argument at how I'm different from the other, right? Because if I'm at the margin, I'm away from the center and everybody else at the center, so I'm different from others. It tends to straitjacket creative ideation. So he's telling you what is the problem with differentiation, that if you look at differentiation, your storytelling methods are limited. Straitjacket means limitation, right? How many creative breakthroughs ways are there, for instance, to tell a story on the balm that penetrates thrice as deep? So he's using this balm as a specific. He's pointing to the fact that differentiation might lead to creative limitations as far as creating the ad is concerned, right? The point being made is, again, the main idea is clearly stated and highlighted with this preamble of sorts. The point being made is this: the idea of differentiation is perhaps becoming secondary to the need to connect with consumers emotionally, right? So connecting with consumers emotionally versus the idea of differentiation, right? Okay, so that covers the passage. I hope it made sense to you, and I also hope that you understood that this whole activity, this whole process was about using the skills that we have learned, and very basic ideas like looking for the main idea, always trying to identify whether some piece of information, whether it's general in nature or specific in nature, using conjunctions of logic, of contrast, of continuation, of conclusion, right? Of examples. So using conjunctions to make sense even when it is difficult, even using the specifics to understand the general idea, because sometimes the language for the general idea will be slightly difficult, but in those cases you can use the specifics to get to the main idea or the general idea. Understanding that how various specifics or various examples might be supporting different general ideas, right? For example, in our case, the chaos punch action machine and the turbojet was referring to the idea of that the arguments at the margin or the differentiation based advertising had started losing some value, right? Also, that once you get the main idea, how you can jump through specifics, or how one can eliminate specifics, or how they take up a bulk of the passage volume, how ideas are repeated over and over again in different words using different language, right? So I hope all of this made sense. And looking at the macro picture, the big picture, I hope you can see it very clearly. The areas in blue refer to differentiation based advertising, and the areas in red refer to storytelling or emotional connection building, right? And beyond that, there is also a lot of specifics, right? Coke, Pepsi, Thumbs Up, Hutch, and Airtel, etc., etc. So these are all specifics of the general idea of brands and what advertising method they're using. So I hope you got the main idea. The main idea is the changing role of advertising from differentiation based advertising to consumer connection based advertising, right? And now answering the question should be fairly easy.